They thought I'd never find out. They were wrong.
The spotlight hit my face like a slap, and for one glorious second, I thought maybe this night wouldn't end with me wanting to burn down the entire Brighton Arts Foundation. I was wrong, of course. I'm always wrong about these things. Ladies and gentlemen, I said into the microphone, squinting past the blinding light at the sea of tuxedos and evening gowns, welcome to our annual fundraising gala, where we celebrate the magic of theater and the even greater magic of separating you from your money. A few polite chuckles rippled through the crowd. Not bad for an opening. I'm Nick Garrison, 40 years old, professional set designer, amateur comedian, and apparently tonight's master of ceremonies because the real host called in sick. Or maybe he just had better sense than to show up. I'm filling in for Richard Blackwood tonight, I continued, which means you're getting the discount version of charm and sophistication. Think of me as the store brand host. Same basic function, half the polish, twice the sarcasm. More laughter this time. Good. Maybe I could salvage this evening after all. From the wings, I caught sight of my wife Elise, adjusting her emerald green dress, the one that cost more than most people's rent. She looked stunning as always, but there was something in her posture, a tension that made my stomach clench. She was supposed to be proud of me tonight. I was receiving the Foundation's Excellence in Design Award, my first major recognition in 15 years of marriage. Before we begin tonight's festivities, I said, I want to thank my beautiful wife, Elise Garrison, our Foundation's arts director, for making all this possible. Honey, you've turned our little theater into something magical. I gestured toward her, expecting a smile, a wave, something. Instead, she was whispering urgently to Simon Braddock, our lead actor. Golden Boy Simon, with his perfect jawline and his tendency to quote Shakespeare at inappropriate moments. They stood close together, too close, her hand on his arm. The microphone picked up my pause, amplifying the awkward silence. Well, I said, forcing a grin. Artists? Am I right? Always in their own world. The audience laughed, but it felt hollow. Something was wrong, very wrong. I pushed through the rest of my opening remarks, introducing board members and thanking donors, but my eyes kept drifting to Elise and Simon. They'd moved deeper into the wings now, their conversation growing more animated. Elise looked upset. Simon looked guilty? And now, I said, wrapping up my introduction, please enjoy dinner while we prepare for tonight's special presentations. The bar is open, the food is excellent, and the entertainment is, well, you'll see. I stepped off the stage to scattered applause, immediately scanning the crowd for Elise. She was nowhere to be seen. Neither was Simon. Great job up there, Nick. Mark Patterson, my oldest friend and the closest thing I had to a drinking buddy, appeared at my elbow with 2 glasses of whiskey. You almost looked like you knew what you were doing. Thanks for the overwhelming confidence, I said, accepting the drink gratefully. Mark was one of the few people in this crowd who'd known me before I became Elise's husband. Back when I was just Nick, the guy who could build a medieval castle out of plywood and make it look real under stage lights. So where's the missus? Mark asked, scanning the crowd. Thought she'd be glued to your side tonight, what with your big award and all. Good question. I knocked back half the whiskey, feeling it burn. She's around somewhere, probably making sure everything runs smoothly. Right. Mark's tone suggested he wasn't buying it, but he didn't push. That was Mark, loyal to a fault, but not stupid. We made small talk for a few minutes, but I was distracted, my eyes constantly searching for Elise. Finally, I spotted Tessa Winters, Elise's assistant, near the dessert table. Tessa was 25, ambitious, and gossipy as heck. If anyone knew where Elise was, it would be her. Excuse me, Mark, I need to find my wife. I made my way through the crowd, dodging conversations about upcoming productions and grant applications. The Boston theater community was small and incestuous. Everyone knew everyone else's business, or thought they did. Tessa, I called out as I approached. She turned, her face flushing slightly. Interesting. Oh, hi, Nick. Great job with the opening, very funny. Thanks. Have you seen Elise? I wanted to talk to her before the presentations. Tessa's eyes darted away. I think she's backstage, checking on the technical setup. With Simon? The flush deepened. I'm not sure who's back there. Liar. But I just smiled and nodded. Thanks. I'll find her. I headed toward the backstage area, but stopped when I heard voices coming from the tech booth. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized one of the voices immediately. Tessa's. I can't believe they're being so obvious about it, she was saying to someone I couldn't see. I mean, everyone knows, but still. How long has it been going on? The second voice belonged to James Crawford, one of our supporting actors. Months, since at least the spring production, maybe longer. My blood turned to ice water. They were talking about an affair. And given the context, given Tessa's reaction when I asked about Elise, does Nick know? God, no. Poor guy's completely clueless. Elise has him wrapped around her little finger. I stepped closer to the door, my heart hammering. It's kind of sad, really, Tessa continued. He's actually talented, you know? His set designs are incredible, but she treats him like he's invisible. Well, after tonight, things might change, James said. Simon's getting pretty tired of sneaking around, and Elise is ambitious. She's not going to stay married to a set designer forever, not when she could have a leading man. The conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. I backed away from the door, my mind reeling. An affair, months long. Everyone knew except me. I made it to the men's room just in time to lose my dinner. When I was done retching, I stared at myself in the mirror. Same face I'd had that morning. Brown hair going gray at the temples, laugh lines around my eyes, the small scar on my chin from a childhood accident. But somehow I looked different. Smaller, pathetic. The door opened and Mark walked in. There you are. They're about to start the presentations. You okay? You look like heck. Just nervous, I lied. Big night and all. Mark studied my face. Nick, if something's wrong, nothing's wrong. Let's go watch me get my award. We walked back to the main hall together, Mark shooting me concerned glances. The lights had dimmed, and Judith Greer, the Foundation's legendary director, was taking the stage. At 61, Judith was still commanding, though I'd noticed lately that she seemed more fragile, more insecure about her position. Good evening, Judith said, her voice carrying easily through the room. Tonight, we celebrate excellence in the arts, and it gives me great pleasure to present our annual awards. She went through the minor categories first. Best Supporting Actor, Best Costume Design, Best Lighting. I barely heard any of it. My eyes were locked on Elise, who had finally reappeared and was standing near the stage. She looked composed, professional, beautiful. She also wouldn't meet my eyes. And now, Judith continued, for our final award of the evening, the Excellence in Design Award, recognizing outstanding achievement in set design and production values. This was it, my moment. 15 years of marriage, 20 years in the theater, and finally some recognition. This year's recipient has consistently delivered innovative, breathtaking designs that transport our audiences to other worlds. His work on our spring production of Hamlet was particularly noteworthy. I started to stand, but Judith wasn't finished. However, I'm pleased to announce that this year we're presenting the award to someone who embodies not just technical excellence, but artistic vision and leadership. Someone who truly brings magic to our stage. My stomach dropped. Simon Braddock, please come forward. The applause was thunderous. I sat frozen as Simon bounded onto the stage, all smiles and false modesty. He kissed Judith's cheek, accepted the award, my award, and moved to the microphone. Thank you so much, he said, his voice rich and theatrical. This is such an honor. I have to say, though, that I couldn't have achieved any of this without the support and inspiration of our incredible arts director, Elise Garrison. He looked directly at her as he spoke, and she beamed back at him. The message was clear to anyone paying attention. They were a team, a partnership, and I was just the husband. Elise has taught me that true art comes from passion, from following your heart even when it's difficult, even when it means making hard choices. The subtext hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about the award, this was a public declaration. They were telling everyone, telling me that they were together. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Several people turned to look at me, but I didn't care. I had to get out of there before I did something stupid. Nick? Mark grabbed my arm. Where are you going? I need some air. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the curious stares and whispered comments. Behind me, Simon was still talking, probably thanking more people who weren't me. I made it to the lobby before my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the message made my blood run cold. Check the AV feed, room 3B. You need to see this. Room 3B was the technical control room, tucked away on the second floor where the donors and board members never ventured. I climbed the stairs slowly, my mind racing. Who had sent that text, and what exactly was I supposed to see? The door was unlocked. Inside, banks of monitors showed different camera angles of the gala. The main stage, the dining area, the backstage wings. A young tech I didn't recognize was hunched over a console, earbuds in, completely absorbed in his work. "Excuse me," I said. He looked up, startled, pulling out his earbuds. "Oh, hey, you're Nick Garrison, right? The guy who was supposed to get the award?" Word traveled fast. "Yeah, that's me. I got a text saying I should check the AV feed." He frowned. I didn't send any text, but he hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Look, I probably shouldn't show you this, but there's something you need to see. We've got cameras backstage for security, right? Well, about 20 minutes ago, 2 of them picked up something." He pulled up a video file on his screen. The timestamp showed it was from earlier in the evening, right around when I was doing my opening remarks. "This is from camera 7, backstage left," he said, clicking play. The image was grainy but clear enough. Elise and Simon stood close together in what they obviously thought was a private corner. But they weren't just talking, they were kissing, passionately. Elise's hands were tangled in his hair, his arms wrapped around her waist. "Jesus," I whispered. "It gets worse," the tech said. He fast-forwarded to another section. "This is from about 10 minutes later." Now they were talking, their body language intimate, conspiratorial. The audio was faint, but I could make out bits of conversation. "Can't keep doing this." Elise's voice. "After tonight, we won't have to..." Simon's response. "He has no idea. Better this way. Never deserved the award anyway." That last comment hit like a slap. I leaned closer to the screen, straining to hear more. "Oh, board meeting next week? Judith's position, perfect timing." "Get rid of him completely." The tech looked uncomfortable. "There's more, but maybe you shouldn't..." "Show me." He clicked to another file. This one was more recent, from just before the award presentation. Elise and Simon again, but this time they weren't alone. Judith Greer was with them, looking upset. "Told you this would happen," Judith's voice, clearer this time. "And had to be done." Elise, cold and matter-of-fact. "Nick's going to be devastated." "Nick will get over it, he always does." Simon laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on, Judith. We both know he's dead weight. When's the last time he brought in a major donor? When's the last time his work got reviewed in the Globe?" "That's not the point." "It's exactly the point," Elise interrupted. "The foundation needs to evolve. We can't keep carrying people out of sentiment." "People?" And she was talking about me like I was a charity case. "Besides," Simon added, "after the board meeting next week, there won't be room for passengers. The new structure Elise proposed is going to streamline everything." "New structure? What new structure?" The tech paused the video. "That's all I've got. But listen, you didn't see this from me, okay? I could lose my job." "What's your name?" Danny Morrison. "I just started here last month." "Danny, who else has access to these feeds?" "Just me and the head of security, but he left early tonight. Food poisoning." "Convenient. Can you make copies of these files?" I don't know if I should." "Danny." I looked him straight in the eye. "My wife is having an affair with our lead actor. They just stole an award that was supposed to be mine. And from what I just heard, they're planning to push me out of the foundation entirely. I think I have a right to protect myself." He considered this, then nodded. "Yeah, okay, that's pretty messed up." He started copying files to a thumb drive. "You know what's really crazy? This feed was supposed to be internal only, but somehow it got connected to the main broadcast system. If someone knew what they were doing, they could probably patch it through to the big screens downstairs." I felt a slow smile spread across my face. "Is that right?" "Theoretically. But you'd need admin access to the system, and only a few people have that." "Who?" "Me, the security chief, and..." He checked a list on his computer. "Elise Garrison and Judith Greer." Of course. Elise had insisted on having technical access when she became arts director. "For emergencies," she'd said. "Danny, I need you to do something for me." "I don't know, man. I really can't afford to lose this job." "You won't lose your job. In fact, if you help me, I'll make sure you get a promotion. But I need you to trust me." He looked nervous, but curious. "What do you want me to do?" "In about 10 minutes, I'm going to send you a text. When you get it, I want you to patch the backstage security feed to the main screens downstairs. Can you do that? Technically, yeah, but no buts. Just do it when I text you. And Danny, make sure the audio is loud and clear. I pocketed the thumb drive and headed for the door. Mr. Garrison, what are you going to do? I paused in the doorway. I'm going to give everyone the show they really came to see. Back downstairs, the gala was in full swing. Simon was working the crowd, my award tucked under his arm like a trophy. Elise stood nearby, accepting congratulations and looking radiant. They were the perfect couple, attractive, successful, destined for great things. Too bad it was all built on lies. I found Mark at the bar, nursing another whiskey. There you are, he said. You missed Simon's acceptance speech. Real piece of work. Lots of talk about new directions and fresh vision. Barely mentioned you at all. I heard enough. You sure you're okay? You look like you want to homicide someone. Not homicide, something much more satisfying. I pulled out my phone and typed a quick message to Danny. Now, Nick, what are you... The main screens around the room suddenly flickered. The slideshow of Foundation highlights disappeared, replaced by a grainy backstage image. For a moment, nobody noticed. Then someone pointed and conversations began to die as people realized what they were seeing. Elise and Simon, kissing passionately. The audio kicked in a second later, their voices echoing through the sound system. Can't keep doing this. After tonight, we won't have to... The room went dead silent. Every eye was glued to the screens as the video played out. The kiss, the intimate conversation, the casual dismissal of me as dead weight. I watched Elise's face as she realized what was happening. The color drained from her cheeks, her mouth opening in shock. She looked around frantically, probably trying to figure out how to stop it. Simon was faster on the uptake. He started pushing through the crowd toward the tech booth, but it was too late. The damage was done. Nick will get over it. He always does. Simon's laugh echoed through the room, followed by his comment about me being dead weight. Several board members were looking at me now, their expressions ranging from pity to embarrassment to anger. The video ended, but the screens didn't go back to the slideshow. Instead, they showed a live feed from backstage, where Elise and Simon were having a heated argument, their voices still being broadcast to the room. How the heck did this happen? Simon hissed. I don't know. Someone must have hacked the system. Well, fix it. I'm trying. Judith Greers appeared on screen looking panicked. The board is going to have my head for this. Elise, what were you thinking? I was thinking about the future of this foundation. By humiliating your husband in front of 300 donors? The crowd was transfixed. This was better than any drama we'd ever staged. Real emotion, real betrayal, real consequences playing out in real time. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Mark was looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. I don't know what you did, he said quietly, but it was brilliant. I didn't do anything, I said, loud enough for nearby people to hear. I'm just as shocked as everyone else. But I couldn't hide my smile. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I had some control over my life. The screens finally went dark, but the damage was done. The room buzzed with conversation, people pulling out their phones to call friends and share the gossip. The Boston theater community loved a scandal, and this was a doozy. Elise emerged from backstage, her composure cracked, but not completely shattered. She made a beeline for me, her eyes blazing. We need to talk, she said through gritted teeth. I think we've all heard enough talking for one night. Nick, please, not here. But I was done being accommodating, done being the understanding husband, done being invisible. Actually, here is perfect, I said, raising my voice so the people around us could hear. After all, you didn't seem to mind making our private business public a few minutes ago. That wasn't my fault. Wasn't it? Funny, because from what I heard, you and Simon have been planning this for months. The affair, the award, pushing me out of the foundation. Did I miss anything? She looked around at the faces watching us, realizing that any response would just make things worse. This isn't over, she whispered. You're absolutely right, I said. It's not. She turned and walked away, Simon following like a lost puppy. I watched them go, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. But this was just the beginning. They'd humiliated me, stolen from me, planned to destroy my career. The video was a good start, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. I woke up alone in our king-size bed, which wasn't unusual. Elise often stayed out late for foundation business. What was unusual was the silence. No shower running, no coffee brewing, no sound of her getting ready for another day of running the arts world. The events of the previous night came flooding back as I reached for my phone. 17 missed calls from Elise, 12 from unknown numbers that were probably reporters, and one from Mark that just said, "Holy crap, dude, call me." But first, I needed coffee and the morning news. The story had already hit the local entertainment blogs. Theater scandal rocks Brighton Arts Foundation, read the headline on Boston Arts Weekly. Below it was a grainy screenshot from the video showing Elise and Simon in their passionate embrace. I scrolled through the article, savoring every word. Last night's annual gala took an unexpected turn when security footage of an apparent affair between arts director Elise Garrison and lead actor Simon Braddock was accidentally broadcast to the entire audience. The footage, which included audio of the pair discussing plans to restructure the foundation and disparaging Garrison's husband, set designer Nick Garrison, has sent shockwaves through Boston's tight-knit theater community. Accidentally broadcast. I almost laughed out loud. My phone rang. Mark. "Jesus, Nick, are you okay? I've been trying to reach you all night." "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." "Where's Elise?" I looked around the empty apartment. Her side of the closet was missing several suitcases. Gone, apparently. Packed up and left while I was sleeping. Probably for the best. Things are going to get ugly for a while. They already are ugly. Have you seen the blogs? I've seen everything. Channel 7 picked up the story for their morning show. TMZ is running it. Someone posted the whole video on YouTube and it's got 50,000 views already. I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. Good. Good? Nick, your marriage just imploded on live television. My marriage imploded months ago, Mark. I just didn't know it yet. There was a pause. Fair point. So what happens now? Now I figure out my next move. You mean legally? Divorce lawyers and all that? Among other things. After I hung up, I made coffee and started going through the apartment more systematically. Elise had taken her clothes, her jewelry, her laptop, and several pieces of art we'd bought together, but she'd left behind some interesting things. Her desk drawer was still full of foundation documents, including what looked like a complete reorganization plan. I spread the papers out on the kitchen table and started reading. It was worse than I'd thought. The new structure Elise had mentioned wasn't just about pushing me out. It was about consolidating power. She'd planned to merge several positions, eliminate the current board structure, and essentially turn the foundation into her personal kingdom. Simon was slated to become the new artistic director, a position that didn't currently exist but would apparently control all casting and production decisions. There was also a detailed financial analysis showing how much money the foundation could save by streamlining operations and eliminating redundant positions. My position was listed under redundant, but the most interesting document was a series of emails between Elise and someone named Victoria Sterling, a name I didn't recognize. The emails went back 6 months and discussed the transition and removing obstacles. One email from Victoria was particularly illuminating. The board won't approve the restructuring as long as Judith has influence, and she won't move against Nick out of loyalty. We need to create a situation where she has no choice but to support the changes. The award ceremony could be the perfect opportunity. Public humiliation often clarifies priorities. So it wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. They'd planned the whole thing, stealing my award, humiliating me publicly, forcing Judith to choose between her loyalty to me and her position at the foundation. I took photos of every document, then put them back exactly where I'd found them. Elise might have fled, but she'd be back for her things eventually. When she did, I wanted her to think I hadn't seen any of this. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Nick Garrison? Speaking. This is Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News. I was wondering if you'd like to comment on last night's incident at the Brighton Arts Foundation Gala. No comment. Mr. Garrison, our viewers are very sympathetic to your situation. This could be an opportunity to tell your side of the story. I said no comment. I hung up and immediately got 3 more calls from different reporters. I let them all go to voicemail. But the 4th call was from Judith Greer. Nick, we need to talk. Can you come to my office this afternoon? I don't think that's a good idea, Judith. I'm sure the board wants to distance themselves from this mess. Actually, that's what I want to discuss with you. 2 o'clock? I agreed, curious about what she had to say. Judith had been like a mentor to me when I first joined the foundation. If anyone would give me straight answers, it would be her. The foundation offices were in a converted brownstone in Back Bay, all exposed brick and hardwood floors designed to suggest both artistic credibility and financial stability. I'd spent countless hours in these rooms over the years, planning productions and solving technical problems. Judith's office was on the third floor with windows overlooking the public garden. She looked tired when I walked in, older than her 61 years. Nick, sit down. We have a lot to discuss. If this is about last night was a disaster, but it wasn't your fault. I know that, and so does the board. I sat down across from her desk. Do they? Because from what I heard on that video, Elise seemed pretty confident about her reorganization plans. Judith winced. You heard that part. I heard all of it, Judith. The affair, the award, the plan to push me out. What I don't understand is how you fit into all this. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. Elise came to me 3 months ago with a proposal to modernize the foundation. New leadership structure, expanded programming, bigger budget. It all sounded reasonable. But she wanted changes that would essentially eliminate the current board's oversight, give her and her team complete control over artistic and financial decisions. And you went along with it? I didn't have much choice. The board was already questioning my leadership. Donations were down, attendance was flat. When Elise presented her plan, backed up with detailed financial projections and endorsements from major donors, it looked like our best option for survival. What donors? That's where it gets complicated. Judith pulled out a file folder. It turns out several of the endorsements were exaggerated, and some of the financial projections were based on grants that don't actually exist. I felt a chill. You're saying she lied? I'm saying she was overly optimistic about our funding prospects. But by the time I realized that, the board had already approved the restructuring in principle. And my position was always going to be eliminated. I'm sorry, Nick. I tried to fight for you, but Elise made a compelling case that we needed to focus resources on revenue-generating activities. Revenue-generating activities. Like hiring her boyfriend as artistic director. So what happens now? I asked. Now we try to salvage what's left of our reputation. The board met in an emergency session this morning. Elise has been suspended pending a full investigation. And Simon? His contract has been terminated, effective immediately. I felt a surge of satisfaction. What about the reorganization? On hold indefinitely, which means your position is safe, at least for now. At least for now. Not exactly a ringing endorsement. Judith, I need to ask you something. Last night when that video played, you didn't look surprised. You looked panicked, but not surprised. She was quiet for a long moment. I knew about the affair, she finally admitted. I'd suspected for weeks, and Elise confirmed it when she asked me to present the award to Simon instead of you. You knew, and you still went along with it. I hoped it was just a personal matter that wouldn't affect the foundation. I was naive. Naive or scared of losing your job? Her face flushed. That's not fair, isn't it? You let them steal my award, humiliate me in front of 300 people, and plan to destroy my career, all because you were afraid of making waves. Nick, no, Judith. You don't get to play the victim here. You had a choice, and you chose to protect yourself instead of doing what was right. I stood up to leave, but she called after me. What are you going to do? I paused at the door. I'm going to do what I should have done months ago. I'm going to fight back. The board won't tolerate any more drama. The board can go to heck, and so can you. I walked out feeling better than I had in years. For too long, I'd been the accommodating one, the understanding one, the one who went along to get along. But that version of Nick Garrison was dead. Time to see what the new version could do. 3 days after the gala, I was sitting in the office of Patricia Morrison, Boston's most ruthless divorce attorney. Her reputation for destroying cheating spouses was legendary, which was exactly what I needed. Mr. Garrison, she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought, this is quite a collection of evidence. Your wife was remarkably careless. She thought I was too stupid to figure it out. Her mistake. Now, let's talk strategy. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect property division and alimony. With this level of documentation, we can make a strong case that she forfeited any claim to marital assets. What about the foundation? She's been suspended, but she still has allies on the board. Patricia smiled, and I understood why opposing lawyers feared her. Leave that to me. I have some ideas. Over the next week, I watched my life transform. The story had grown beyond the local theater community and become a full-blown media sensation. Cheating Wife Steals Husband's Award was the kind of story that wrote itself, and every outlet from the Boston Globe to Entertainment Weekly wanted a piece of it. I turned down most interview requests, but I did agree to talk to Sarah Chen from the Globe's arts section. She'd always been fair in her coverage of the foundation, and I trusted her to tell the story accurately. "Nick," she said when we met at a coffee shop in Harvard Square, "I have to ask, did you know about the affair before the gala?" I suspected something was wrong, but I didn't know for sure until that night. "And you had nothing to do with the video being broadcast?" I was as shocked as everyone else. Technically true. I'd been shocked by how well it worked. "What's next for you professionally?" "I'm exploring my options. The foundation has offered to keep me on, but I'm not sure that's the best environment for me right now." What I didn't tell her was that I'd already had 3 job offers from other theaters, including one from the Huntington Theater Company that came with a significant salary increase and the title of Senior Production Designer. But I wasn't ready to leave Boston yet. I had unfinished business. The first part of my plan involved Simon Braddock. Losing his contract with the foundation was just the beginning. I wanted to make sure he never worked in Boston theater again. I started by reaching out to my network of technical professionals: set designers, lighting technicians, sound engineers, costume designers. These were the people who actually made theater happen, and they talked to each other constantly. A word from me about Simon's unprofessional behavior and difficult attitude would spread through the community like wildfire. Within a week, Simon had been dropped from 2 upcoming productions. His agent stopped returning his calls. The gossip blogs started running stories about his diva behavior and reputation for sleeping with married women. But I wasn't satisfied with just destroying his career. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation I'd experienced. That's where Danny Morrison, the young tech from the gala, came in. I'd kept in touch with him, and he'd proven to be remarkably resourceful. When I mentioned that I was curious about Simon's living situation, Danny did some digging. It turned out Simon was behind on his rent for his expensive Back Bay apartment. His landlord was already considering eviction proceedings, but was hesitant because Simon was semi-famous. A few anonymous phone calls to the landlord providing information about Simon's terminated contract and damaged reputation were enough to tip the scales. Simon was served with eviction papers on a Tuesday morning, with photographers mysteriously present to capture his humiliation. The photos ran in the Boston Herald the next day under the headline, "Fallen Star Loses Home." But Simon was the easy target. Elise was going to be more challenging. She'd hired her own attorney and was fighting the divorce proceedings aggressively. She was also trying to rehabilitate her reputation, giving interviews where she portrayed herself as a visionary leader who'd been brought down by a vindictive husband. The foundation was stagnating under the old leadership, she told Boston Magazine. I was trying to bring fresh energy and new ideas, but there were people who were resistant to change. People like me, she meant. The personal aspects of this situation are regrettable, she continued, but they shouldn't overshadow the real issues facing arts organizations in Boston. We need leaders who are willing to take risks and challenge the status quo. The interview made my blood boil, but it also gave me an idea. If Elise wanted to play the role of the misunderstood visionary, I'd give her an audience. I reached out to Victoria Sterling, the mysterious woman from Elise's emails. It took some detective work, but I finally tracked her down. She was a consultant who specialized in organizational transformation for nonprofit organizations. Her website was full of buzzwords about disruptive innovation and paradigm shifts. I called her office and introduced myself as a journalist working on a story about arts management. "I'm particularly interested in your work with the Brighton Arts Foundation," I said. "I understand you were advising them on a major restructuring." "I'm afraid I can't comment on specific client relationships," she said, but I could hear the interest in her voice. Victoria Sterling was exactly the kind of person who loved seeing her work get media attention. "Of course, but hypothetically, what would you say to critics who argue that these restructuring efforts are really just power grabs disguised as reform?" "That's a very cynical view. In my experience, resistance to change usually comes from people who benefit from the status quo. even when that status quo is clearly failing. And when there are personal relationships involved, affairs, conflicts of interest, that sort of thing. There was a pause. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Were you aware that Elise Garrison was having an affair with Simon Braddock when you advised her on the restructuring plan that would have made him artistic director? Another pause, longer this time. I think this conversation is over. Ms. Sterling, I have emails between you and Mrs. Garrison discussing removing obstacles and creating situations to force board approval of your recommendations. How do you respond to allegations that you helped orchestrate the public humiliation of Nick Garrison? I have no idea what you're talking about. Really, because I have documentation suggesting otherwise. Would you like to comment before I publish? Publish what? Who are you really? I told you, I'm a journalist, and this is going to be a very interesting story. I hung up, smiling. Within an hour, Victoria Sterling's assistant called back, asking if I'd be willing to meet with Ms. Sterling to clarify any misunderstandings. The meeting was set for the next afternoon at her office in the financial district. I arrived early and spent some time in the lobby observing. Victoria Sterling Consulting occupied half of the 20th floor of a gleaming office tower. Through the glass doors, I could see a reception area decorated with awards and testimonials from grateful clients. Victoria Sterling herself was exactly what I'd expected, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of confidence that came from years of telling other people how to run their organizations. Mr. Garrison, she said, extending a manicured hand. I have to say, I was surprised by your call yesterday. I imagine you were. She led me to her office, which had a spectacular view of Boston Harbor. The walls were covered with framed articles about her work and photos of her with various civic leaders. Before we begin, she said, I want to clarify something. You said you were a journalist, but my research suggests you're actually the ex-husband of my former client. Soon-to-be ex-husband. And I never said I was a journalist. I said I was working on a story about arts management, which I am. I see, and what kind of story would that be? I pulled out a folder and placed it on her desk. The kind that involves conspiracy, fraud, and the systematic destruction of a man's career and reputation. She didn't touch the folder. Mr. Garrison, I think you're confused about my role in this situation. I was hired to provide management consulting services, nothing more. Really? Then how do you explain this? I opened the folder and pulled out copies of her emails with Elise. Her face went pale as she recognized them. Where did you get those? Does it matter? The point is, they show a clear pattern of conspiracy. You weren't just providing consulting services, you were actively helping Elise plan my destruction. That's not... You're misinterpreting. Am I? Let me read you one of my favorites. I picked up a printed email. This is from you to Elise, dated 3 months ago. The board won't approve the restructuring as long as Judith has influence, and she won't move against Nick out of loyalty. We need to create a situation where she has no choice but to support the changes. Victoria's composure was cracking. That was taken out of context. Here's another one. The award ceremony could be the perfect opportunity. Public humiliation often clarifies priorities. You literally advised my wife to humiliate me in public to advance your restructuring plan. You don't understand the pressures these organizations face? I understand perfectly. You saw an opportunity to make money by destroying people's lives, and you took it. I stood up and gathered the papers. Here's what's going to happen, Victoria. You're going to write a detailed confession explaining your role in this conspiracy. You're going to admit that the restructuring plan was based on fraudulent financial projections, and you're going to provide testimony for my divorce proceedings. I'll do no such thing. Then I'll take these emails to the Boston Globe, the Herald, and every other media outlet in the city. I'll make sure everyone knows that Victoria Sterling Consulting is in the business of destroying marriages for profit. You're bluffing. Am I? I've got nothing left to lose, Victoria. My marriage is over, my reputation has been dragged through the mud, and my career has been sabotaged. What exactly do you think you can threaten me with? She stared at me for a long moment, then reached for her phone. I need to call my lawyer. Go ahead, but remember, the longer this drags out, the more time I have to dig into your other clients. I wonder how many other organizations you've helped restructure through personal destruction. I left her office feeling better than I had in weeks. The look of panic in Victoria Sterling's eyes had been worth the trip alone, but I was just getting started. 2 weeks later, I was standing in the lobby of the Four Seasons, waiting for the annual Boston Theater Awards ceremony. It was the biggest night in the city's theater calendar, and everyone who mattered would be there, including Elise and Simon. My invitation had come from the Huntington Theater Company, where I'd accepted the position of senior production designer. The job came with a substantial raise, creative control over major productions, and most importantly, respect for my colleagues. But tonight wasn't about my new job. Tonight was about settling old scores. I'd spent the past 2 weeks carefully orchestrating what would happen. Danny Morrison had been invaluable, using his technical skills to gather information and coordinate timing. Patricia Morrison, my divorce attorney, had provided legal guidance to ensure everything I planned was completely above board. And Victoria Sterling had provided the ammunition. Her confession had been even more damaging than I'd hoped. Not only had she admitted to helping Elise plan my public humiliation, but she'd also revealed that the foundation's financial projections had been completely fabricated. The grants and donations Elise had promised didn't exist. The restructuring plan would have bankrupted the organization within 2 years. Armed with this information, I'd approached the foundation's board directly. Judith Greer had tried to minimize the damage, but the evidence was overwhelming. Elise wasn't just an unfaithful wife. She was a fraud who'd nearly destroyed a 60-year-old arts organization. The board had voted unanimously to terminate her contract and pursue legal action to recover the money she'd already been paid for the restructuring consulting. But tonight's event would be the final act. I spotted Elise as soon as she walked into the lobby. She was wearing a stunning black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and she was accompanied by Simon, who looked uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. They were trying to present a united front, but I could see the cracks. Simon kept checking his phone nervously, and Elise's smile looked forced. The past month had not been kind to either of them. "Nick," Mark appeared at my elbow, looking sharp in his own tux. "You clean up nice for an unemployed set designer." "Former unemployed set designer," I corrected. "I start at the Huntington next week." "Congratulations. So what's the plan for tonight?" "Plan? Come on, Nick. I know you too well. You didn't come here just to collect an award and make small talk. You're up to something." He was right, of course, but I wasn't going to spoil the surprise. The ceremony was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, with round tables for 10 and a stage set up for the presentations. I was seated at the Huntington's table, surrounded by my new colleagues and feeling more comfortable than I had in years. Elise and Simon were across the room at a table near the back, a clear signal of their diminished status in the community. A few months ago, they would have been at the head table with the other VIPs. The evening proceeded normally through the first few categories: Best Supporting Actor, Best Costume Design, Best Direction. I barely paid attention, focused instead on watching Elise and Simon. They were putting on a good show, laughing at the presenters' jokes and applauding politely, but I could see the tension in their body language. Finally, it was time for the Excellence in Design Award, the same award that had been stolen from me at the Foundation Gala. This year's winner, the presenter announced, is Nick Garrison of the Brighton Arts Foundation for his innovative work on the spring production of Hamlet. The applause was thunderous. I stood and made my way to the stage, savoring every step. This was my moment, the recognition I deserved all along. But when I reached the podium, I didn't give the speech I'd prepared. "Thank you," I said, looking out at the audience. "This award means more to me than you can imagine, especially considering that it was originally given to someone else." A murmur ran through the crowd. Everyone knew the story, but hearing me reference it directly was unexpected. A month ago, at the Brighton Arts Foundation Gala, I watched the same award being presented to Simon Braddock. Despite the fact that he had nothing to do with the set design for Hamlet, it was given to him by my wife, Elise Garrison, as part of what we now know was a systematic plan to humiliate me and drive me out of the foundation. The murmur grew louder. I could see Elise's face, pale with shock. But tonight isn't about settling scores or rehashing old grievances. Tonight is about truth. And the truth is that the Boston theater community deserves better than leaders who put personal ambition ahead of artistic integrity. I pulled out a sheet of paper from my jacket pocket. Earlier today, I received a copy of the Massachusetts Attorney General's preliminary report on the Brighton Arts Foundation's financial irregularities. The report concludes that the foundation was nearly bankrupted by a fraudulent restructuring plan that was based on non-existent grants and fabricated donor commitments. The room was dead silent now. I could see reporters pulling out their phones and notebooks. The report also concludes that this fraud was orchestrated by former arts director Elise Garrison, working with consultant Victoria Sterling, as part of a scheme to consolidate power and eliminate oversight. Elise stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. You can't—" "I can and I am," I interrupted. Because unlike some people in this room, I believe in accountability. Security was moving toward Elise's table now, but I wasn't finished. "The Attorney General's office will be announcing formal charges next week. Fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The works." Simon was pulling on Elise's arm, trying to get her to sit down, but she was having none of it. "You vindictive bastard," she shouted. "You're destroying everything I worked for." "No, Elise. You destroyed it yourself when you decided that your personal desires were more important than the organization you were supposed to serve." Security reached their table and began escorting them out. As they passed my table, Elise broke free for a moment and lunged toward me. "This isn't over," she screamed. "I'll ruin you for this." "You already tried," I said calmly. "How did that work out for you?" They were dragged from the room, leaving behind a stunned audience and a dozen cell phone videos that would be on social media within minutes. I returned to the podium and held up my award. "This belongs to everyone who believes that talent and hard work should be rewarded, not punished. Thank you." The applause was deafening. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office at the Huntington Theater Company, reviewing designs for our upcoming production of King Lear, when my assistant knocked on the door. "Nick, there's someone here to see you, says it's personal." I looked up to see Judith Greer standing in the doorway. She looked older, more fragile than the last time I'd seen her. "Hello, Nick. Do you have a few minutes?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Of course. How are you, Judith?" "I've been better." She sat down carefully, clutching her purse. "I suppose you heard about the foundation." I had. The Brighton Arts Foundation had declared bankruptcy 3 weeks ago, unable to recover from the financial damage and scandal. 60 years of Boston theater history gone. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything that had happened, I genuinely loved that organization. "Are you, really?" "Yes. The foundation did good work for a lot of years. It didn't deserve to end like this." "No, it didn't." She was quiet for a moment. "Nick, I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything." "Yes, I do." I knew what Elise was doing was wrong, and I went along with it anyway. I was scared of losing my position, scared of being seen as irrelevant. I let that fear turn me into a coward. "Judith, let me finish. You were loyal to the foundation for 15 years. You never asked for special treatment, never played politics, never did anything but excellent work. And when you needed someone to stand up for you, I failed." I could see tears in her eyes. "The foundation's bankruptcy isn't your fault," I said gently. "Isn't it? If I'd had the courage to stop Elise from the beginning, none of this would have happened. The foundation would still exist, you'd still have your job, and a lot of good people wouldn't have lost their livelihoods." She was right, but there was no point in dwelling on it now. What's done is done. The question is, what happens next? For me, retirement, I suppose. I'm too old and too tainted to start over somewhere else. She managed a weak smile. "But you've landed on your feet. I hear great things about your work here." "I'm happy," I said. "Happier than I've been in years." "And Elise?" That was a more complicated question. Elise had been convicted on 3 felony counts and sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. She'd also been ordered to pay restitution to the foundation's creditors, which meant she'd be financially ruined for the rest of her life. Simon had escaped criminal charges, but his career was over. Last I'd heard, he was working at a restaurant in Portland, Maine, using his real name instead of his stage name. Victoria Sterling had lost her consulting business and was facing her own legal troubles. It turned out the foundation wasn't the only organization she'd helped restructure through fraudulent means. "Elise is paying for her choices," I said finally. "As she should." Judith nodded. "I suppose we all are." After she left, I sat alone in my office, thinking about the past year. The revenge I'd taken had been thorough and devastating. Everyone who had wronged me had paid a price, some more than others. But was I satisfied? Had justice been served? My phone buzzed with a text from Danny Morrison, who was now the head of technical operations at a theater in New York. The message was simple. "Saw the news about the foundation. How are you holding up?" I typed back, "I'm good, really good." And I was. For the first time in years, I was working with people who respected my talent and valued my contributions. I was making more money than I'd ever made before. My divorce had been finalized, leaving me with most of our assets and no ongoing obligations to Elise. But more than that, I'd learned something important about myself. I wasn't the passive, accommodating person I'd thought I was. When pushed too far, I could push back. Hard. My computer chimed with a new email. It was from Sarah Chen at the Boston Globe, asking if I'd be willing to do a follow-up interview about the foundation's bankruptcy. I started to type a polite refusal, then stopped. Maybe it was time to tell the whole story. Not just the facts that had come out in court, but the personal journey, the humiliation, the investigation, the systematic destruction of everyone who had wronged me. I deleted my refusal and typed a new response. I'd be happy to talk, but this time I want to tell the whole story. Because the truth was, I wasn't sorry about what I'd done, not even a little bit. Elise and Simon and Victoria Sterling had made their choices, and I'd made mine. They'd chosen betrayal and fraud and cruelty. I'd chosen justice. And justice, it turned out, was deeply satisfying. 3 days later, the Globe ran a front-page story with the headline, "The Revenge of Nick Garrison, How One Man Brought Down Boston's Theater Elite." The article was long and detailed, chronicling everything from the gala humiliation to the final bankruptcy of the foundation. But the part I was most proud of was the ending. When asked if he had any regrets about his actions, Garrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, not with malice, but with the quiet satisfaction of a man who had fought for himself and won. People like to say that revenge is a dish best served cold. He'd sit, but I disagree. The best revenge is served hot, fast, and with absolute precision. And sometimes it's not really revenge at all. Sometimes it's just justice, delivered by someone who refused to be a victim. Garrison paused, looking out the window of his new office at the bustling theater district below. They thought I was weak because I was kind. They thought I was stupid because I was loyal. They thought I was invisible because I was quiet. They were wrong about all of it. And now they know it. I closed the newspaper and leaned back in my chair. Outside my window, Boston's theater district was coming to life for another evening of performances. Somewhere out there, actors were preparing for their roles, technicians were checking their equipment, and audiences were getting ready to be transported to other worlds. It was a good life, a life I'd earned through talent, hard work, and the occasional act of perfectly justified revenge. My phone rang. It was Mark. "Holy crap, Nick. Did you see the Globe today?" "I saw it. You sound pretty pleased with yourself." "I am. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be, doing exactly what I want to do, with people who actually appreciate me. And Elise?" I thought about my ex-wife sitting in her federal prison cell, probably still convinced that she was the victim in all this. Elise is exactly where she belongs too. "Yikes, Nick. Remind me never to cross you." I laughed. "Just remember, I'm only dangerous to people who try to destroy me first." After I hung up, I went back to my King Lear designs. There was something poetic about working on that particular play, a story about power, betrayal, and the consequences of poor judgment. Shakespeare would have appreciated the irony, but unlike Lear, my story had a happy ending. The villains had been punished, the hero had triumphed, and justice had been served. As I worked, I found myself humming an old song my father used to sing, "Don't get mad, get even." Good advice. The best advice, really. Because in the end, getting even wasn't about revenge at all. It was about refusing to let other people define your worth, your future, or your story. And my story? My story was just beginning.